Welcome. We're in week 6, almost dog days of summer. Coleman's 2015 Certified SBA 7A Loan Closer Training with Lance Sexton. Lance, what's your weather like in Arkansas? We're boiling here in SoCal.
You know, Bob, every time I come to California, I start to think, well, I could live here. The weather's so nice. But we're experiencing California-like weather today. It's 79 degrees in Arkansas.
Well, we got Arkansas weather today. It's 97 or something ridiculous, even with a little humidity. You all know the drill on how to ask questions. Before we get into that, I'm going to give a bonus thing, Lance. I was in Baltimore yesterday for America East. Big news coming down is going to be SBA 1. They're going to roll it out on Monday. Everybody on this line is going to be affected by it. You and I don't know how effective it will be, but the promises are stupendous.
Yeah, Bob, I've been trying to get in front of this and talking to several of SBA's center directors, and conceptually, SBA 1 is going to be an incredible product.
It's going to affect everyone's job position, absolutely.
But, Bob, I worked for SBA long enough to know that they'll roll the product out. There'll be some kinks that they'll have to fix, and there'll be a little confusion because we've all gotten kind of comfortable doing it the way we have, and this will be a new product. So our loan closers, originators, our servicers, and liquidators are all going to have to get retrained on how to use SBA.
But the concept is very simple. At the beginning, the underwriter throws it all up on the website, and once it's there, and then from servicing, you don't have to send them anything. They have the entire file. Closing, obviously, is going to be involved in creating the original file. And liquidation, no more 10-tab, and we're going to go say, hey, a very simple report, because all the original documents are there. No more scrounging. Hey, where's that waiver of the lease, Lance?
The beautiful thing about this, Bob, and a frustration that I've experienced when I was at SBA, when I've been at a bank, and when I've worked for an LSP, all the way through the process, SBA requests documents.
Yeah.
And the same document can be requested at every phase of the process, and you want to ask yourself, Bob, why don't they have it?
Oh,
why do they need it again?
And Vanessa Piccioni, the director of HERD, I was in her session, she said that. Why do we do this? How come we're asking you for the same document 4 times? So they, these are smart people. They understand. They understand the limitations.
A beautiful example, Bob, is the authorization. I mean, our closers are working with the new authorization, but just for their information, if you go through servicing and get to liquidation, the litigation plan asks for a copy of the authorization. The purchase demand request asks for a copy of the authorization. The charge-off request asks for a copy of the authorization. Right. And the care and preservation expense tabs ask for a copy of the authorization.
So it's going to make us more streamlined. Very good. And John Miller, he's now, you would call him the Chief Operations Officer for SBA. He said very clearly, we want to be relevant. We understand what is happening out there on Main Street with alternative lenders, on merchants being able to get money within 24 hours at very high rates. We want to be relevant. We want to meet the need for that demand. So anyway, I think it's positive, it's exciting. Anyway, I got off on that tangent. I apologize. I thought you would enjoy knowing what's going on. Let's go to the poll questions. Number 1. When an SBA loan authorization requires a landlord waiver, I think I just talked about that. Do you have difficulty getting it executed? Why are you asking this, Lance?
Well, it's a common difficult part of closing an SBA loan. When a landlord waiver is requested, quite often you'll get my dad, Bob, is a multiple commercial building owner, and he leases buildings. And if you ask him to execute a landlord waiver, he's old school, and he probably would dig his heels in and say no. But I was just curious how much success our closers are having in getting those landlord waivers executed.
Briefly, tell me why you need one.
Well, a lot of it depends, but it helps in the liquidation process, particularly to give you access to those business personal property assets that are in the lease space. So,
hey, that's new. I don't have to give the numbers anymore. Wow.
great, but Bob, look at the results, and this doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Closers are saying it's a hard thing to get.
Yeah.
One thing I want to point out, you can send a loan authorization change request to the SBA Origination Center request to waive this. Now, I don't recommend it. Being a person who's worked a lot in liquidation, I really want that landlord waiver. But if you have a building owner who's hard-headed, don't want to do it, you've made an effort to get it, and you still want to close the loan, you can send a loan authorization change request, and quite often SBA will approve.
Question number 2. How many of your SBA loans are unsecured? Interesting question, Lance.
Well, I was just curious as to the level of unsecured lending throughout the country, Bob. I know that in my practice as an SBA lender, especially in the Express program, I've used it a lot for those working capital loans that are unsecured, and I just wondered how much our lending group is doing.
I'm surprised at the results. Put it up, Joseph. You can't? For some reason, there we go.
There we go.
33% say less than 25%. Yeah, so that's
Okay.
that would make sense to me. In fact, I think that's a little high. I would have gone lower on that guess. Number 3, are you aware of an instance where your bank had guarantee denied on an early default loan where you had not verified the 4506 tax return?
Now, Bob, I asked this question, but I know our closers will make sure that 4506T and the transcripts and the reconciliation is taken care of. But one of the things that kills me, Bob, I'm working on a purchase demand kit for a bank right now. It's an early default loan. The file is pristine, except there's no 4506T.
Good.
Now,
Very good. Glad you haven't had to deal with that unpleasant experience. Number 4, is it a practice of your institution to have the executed franchise agreement in file as well as a review of the agreement?
And Bob, I asked this question just to kind of re-emphasize a very important point in closing an SBA loan. Quite often, participant banks will get a copy of the franchise agreement, but not the executed copy of the franchise agreement.
By the way,
I also recommend in the process a review with a brief memorandum just discussing what you found in the agreement.
very good. I think that's appropriate. By the way, spoiler alert, Lance, huge changes are coming to the franchise lending arena. SBA made it very clear they want to simplify this. They understand that they are being too burdensome on individual franchisees. You have a common situation where you may have someone own a Wendy's and then someone own a Firestone dealership, or a spouse owns that, or a guarantor, and they're making it very difficult. The quote was there will be significant reductions in paperwork on franchise loans.
Hey, Bob, what I'd like to see SBA do, and guys, you're looking at a former franchise owner himself. SBA has this group of approved franchises. I wish SBA would just come out with a online site. You plug the franchise name in. If it's approved, you're done.
That is what the hint was. So if Jiffy Lube is on the list, you can do it. I mean, you still need to do your prudent documentation and underwriting, and you want to know what's going on with the brand at Jiffy Lube, but you're not required to get all those documents. And I don't even think you need to get the franchise agreement. They're going to say you're a small business, you're fine. But we'll see. And number 5, in your bank's commercial lending policy, do you require life insurance on the guarantors of the loan is fully secured? Another interesting question, Lance.
Well, the reason for this question, Bob, is the SOP clearly points out that if your bank's commercial lending policy does not require life insurance on a similar size non-guaranteed loan, you don't have to require it on your SBA. So I was just curious.
And the answers are a little over half.
Pretty close.
Pretty close. Tell us what we learned in week 6.
Week 6, we talked about the citizenship issues. I have to be honest with you on if you have a non-citizen, legal permanent resident alien, really you're going to want to keep a copy of the 5010 5H on your desktop and go there to understand the requirements for eligibility for an SBA loan. We talked some about franchises and the concept of affiliation. We spent some time on the 4506T, which I think is certainly the most important part of this week's session. And we talked about insurance requirements. One thing on insurance requirements I just want to point out, and we talked about this a little bit, your bank's prudent lending policies, your commercial lending policies, and their insurance requirements are probably going to be pretty much in line with what SBA requires. The other thing that I want to point out is be careful and read the authorization, because the authorization very clearly points out what types of coverages are required, and you need to have those in proof of that file.
Very good. And just as a recap, the head of Herndon yesterday said the first thing that they look at in a purchase demand kit is the authorization, and they want to make sure what you promised SBA, you performed. And if you have some insurance clauses in there that you didn't get, you're going to have an issue.
Bob, the most important document all the way from the beginning, once that authorization is issued, that manages everything you do of the SBA loan process. So understanding what's required in the authorization, keeping it close at hand, is going to make every phase of the SBA loan easier.
We have a loan in default. The loan has been placed in liquidation status and collateral trucks have been sold. I have a few questions pertaining to the applying for the guarantee. I assume the purchase demand kit. We have a second on his personal residence, but based on a recent appraisal, the difference between the appraised value and what is owed on the house is approximately $2 grand. Does SBA require that we pursue this, even though the amount recovered would be insignificant? 2. Go ahead, answer that one first.
You don't have to pursue that. SBA's SOP 5057 points out that if there's a net recoverable value of less than $5,000, you're not going to have to pursue it. In this particular case, you're talking about equity of $2,000. When you actually calculate the net recoverable value, it's going to have a negative net recoverable value because you would have appraisal expense, litigation expense for the foreclosure, brokerage fees. You don't have to pursue that. That's an easy one to justify.
Letters and calls to the borrower to collect the debt have been documented or in the file. As far as the borrower's personal guarantee, what does SBA require us to do? Are we required to bring suit against him in all instances?
Well, I think obviously you're going to want to pay attention if there's a bankruptcy, a Chapter 7 with a discharge. You're not going to have to pursue the guarantor. If not, you're going to need to collect certain pieces of information. Now, I understand that the loan's in default, so the borrower's probably not running into your bank carrying a current copy of their financial statement or a newly minted tax return, but you need to take the financial information that you have, add a current credit report. If you can determine what their financial picture is and you determine there are no assets worth pursuing, then write a memo, document the file, and move on. If you see assets that are worth pursuing, then the SBA does in fact require you to go after the guarantor, get a judgment, pursue those assets.
Does it matter to SBA if we go ahead and charge off the loan on the bank side prior to applying for the guarantee payment?
There's really not anything, Bob, in the SOP that would keep you from doing it. I don't really see why you would. I'd go ahead and go through the liquidation process, present the purchase demand package, get paid, and then walk through the charge-off process. In fact, charge it off when SBA charges.
And I want to bring you up to date. There's a big push by SBA. They have a number, I think Vanessa said, 16,000 loans that need to be charged off. And what is happening is the bank will charge it off on their side, on their books, but forget to send what? The wrap-up report. So therefore, SBA never charges it off. And now there's, in your quarterly report that you receive from SBA, you're going to see loans on the SBA side that SBA thinks is still active, and you don't have them because you've charged it off. So that's going to be a big push in the future, FYI.
Well, Bob, and that's the PAIRS review that banks go through. one of the measurements that determine whether there's a deeper dive into the bank's portfolio and activity is how many loans do they have in liquidation and how old are they? How many loans have not been charged off after a certain point? The reason I would say don't charge it off before you present the SBA guarantee, there are two problems. One, your bank's transcript is not going to match up with SBA's, and that's going to cause a problem when you do your purchase demand kit. Two, you're not walking through the process in the SBA 5057 way, and if you charge it off exactly the picture you just painted, Bob, the bank's going to forget about the wrap-up report and recommendation for charge-off, and they're going to have one sitting out there for 2 or 3 years that SBA still thinks might be accurate.
Email question number 2. Talk to us about the 1919.
Yeah, I was going to say, does Joseph have my response?
Yeah,
to
Joseph,
that
next one. Next page.
It's long.
Oh, we have it in our notes on the SOP. I'm not going to read it. I'll let you summarize.
I think the thing to do is go to your SOP 5010-5H. You're going to have to get the appropriate verification that they're here legally. The 5010 gives you a list of things that you have to collect in order to be able to be eligible for the SBA loan. And this is one of those areas, and I mentioned it earlier, Bob, when I was going through it. You know, you may not keep the entire 5010-5H on your desktop, but the part about non-citizenship or non-citizen eligibility would be a good part to keep up.
Yes, and those rules are always changing, so I don't bother memorizing them. Just know that if it's checked, you have to do something. Go right to the SOP. That's my easy answer.
Bob, I've got to be honest with you. When I have this come up in my practice, I pull up the 5010 and do a Control F and put non-citizen and read and get what information that I need to proceed with my loan.
Hey, I appreciate the questions that have been coming in. Will SBA want to eliminate the Wizard, E-Tran, and T-Soft? The answer is T-Soft. They're a vendor. We'll see what it looks like. Right now, no. It will eliminate the Wizard, and it will eliminate E-Tran. Are we required to retain the original authorization? Is it even required by the SBA?
The loan authorization?
Yeah. How do we retain it? What's going to happen? I guess the question is, okay, I get it signed. This is probably more of a technical thing. I get it signed, I upload it, I scan it in, it's up on the cloud. What do I do with the original documents? Do I shred them, or do I file them away?
I think that I would scan that and keep it in an electronic file. You're still going to need that loan authorization. Now, my understanding of SBA 1, and Bob, we talked about this a little bit earlier in today's session, is SBA is going to have all the documents. But at this point, they're still requiring a copy of the authorization at almost every point of the SBA loan service.
I'm going out on a limb. I don't know, but I would assume if I have a $2 million loan, I think I would retain the original documents somewhere, somehow, for a period of time.
I would too, Bob. And the other thing is, if you're a delegated lender, you're creating your own authorization, and you're supposed to send that to SBA. Having been the deputy director at a servicing center, I can't tell you. I mean, the percentage is over 50% of the loans that are done under delegated authority, the lender forgets to send in the authorization. So SBA doesn't have it.
Yeah. And the question, is there a charge to the franchise when they submit their agreement for approval? Right now there is. There's Fran Data charges the brand to put it up on their website and go through the approval process. I do not know how that will occur in the future, other than the takeaway that I received from the deputy administrator who said there will be, quote, significant paperwork reduction. That's all we know. I suspect that's code for the franchisor no longer will have to pay a fee to be SBA approved. That's a pure guess. Don't take that as gospel. But I don't know, that's my guess. Too much out on the limb? I think that's what's going to happen. Email question. Affiliation, number 3, affiliation question restated. Customer A is a single member LLC. Customer A has 2 other companies where he is a 50% member of Company 2 and 20% member of Company 3. The 3 companies are all independent. Other than underwriting concerns, do Company 2 and 3, are they considered affiliates? And if they are, what do we have to do?
Well, company, the 50% ownership position, I think, would absolutely be considered an affiliate. 20% ownership, probably not, because they clearly stated that there was a level of independence. Now, you're going to have to review Company 3 to make sure there's no dependency by the borrower on Company 3 or dependency by Company 3 on the borrower. But certainly there's an affiliation. There's on the 1920, there's an affiliation question that you're going to have to answer. And when you're inputting the loan on E-Tran, there's some questions that you'll have to answer as well. You also have to collect the financial information and use the financial information of affiliates when doing your credit memorandum in the underwriting process. But Company 2 is absolutely an affiliate. Company 3, I don't think so, because you've indicated that the companies are independent of one another. But if there's a dependency, for instance, Company 3 sells flour and the borrower's a donut shop, and Company 3 sells you see what I mean? You have to evaluate that.
There are also changes coming to affiliations. Remember, when you close these loans, however, you are bound by the SOP in effect of the date of that loan approval. So just because there's going to be changes down the road, i.e. franchise, i.e. affiliation, is going to be changes as well, you still need to follow the rules as they are cumbersome in the SOP. Right, Lance?
Absolutely. That's why on all servicing actions, Bob, I always tell, and I know this is a closer class, but I tell my servicers, attach a copy of the unilateral authority matrix that's in effect at that time, because it changes. And as we've seen with the 5010, Bob, we've had 3 versions in the last 3 years.
And you're having another one coming down. Spoiler alert, a lot of good stuff. They're going to separate the 7A 5010 from the 504, so it'll be 2 different documents. I don't know if you knew that, Lance. I don't know if you knew that one. What are we doing in week 7?
Well, we're going to talk about use of proceeds and the importance of documenting use of proceeds. On early default loans, Bob, the documentation of use of proceeds is critically important. We'll talk a little bit about working capital and what's required related to working capital lending. We'll talk about refinancing. I think refinancing is certainly a tool that every SBA lender needs to consider in building their portfolio. We'll talk about the rules of setting up an escrow. A lot of banks don't set up an escrow, but I had this discussion with one the other day related to life insurance premiums, and they're actually setting up an escrow for that. And we're going to talk about construction loans. And there's some supporting reading materials to help you through that process and to deepen your knowledge in each of those areas.
I enjoyed talking to several of your students in Baltimore, and I know there's a couple banks in Texas and Oklahoma. They're going to be in Mid-America end of the month. Let's look Lance and I up. It's always nice to meet you in person.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Mid-America, I figured, Bob, I was in Dallas last week, as most of our participants know. It's 110. I figure August 31st probably will be 115.
Yeah, it's going to be nice. In fact, are we going to try to have office hours, the last office hours in Dallas? No, we're not going to do that. Never mind. I've been told to shut up.
Well, Bob, Joseph and I were talking about that. It'd be great to do it, but we're going to be done. We'll be complete before we get to Mid-America.
All right. I withdraw the suggestion. Hey, everyone, with that, enjoy the weekend. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you very much.